All right. Well, I guess we should probably get started. I think this is probably going to be the size of our group tonight. We have kind of a smaller, intimate um, gathering. I think part of that had to do with one of the forum names we settled on was meeting individual needs, and then there was a list of like 7 things. So I think Jenna's group maybe stole from the broadband conversation a little bit. There's like childcare, education, anything that has to do with being a human being. So I think there's a lot of people over there. So that being said, I think it's kind of an exciting opportunity. Maybe we can get into some more depth here than we're often able to. And we have a little bit of a script, but I think I might adapt it a little bit on the fly and invite the visiting team, for example, to participate in the discussion a little bit more. But so to get things started, my name is Nick Kramer. I also work at the Council on Rural Development with Paul and Jenna. I'm excited to be here in Addison County tonight. Corinth, Vermont, on the other side of the state is my home base, but I kind of grew up in Middlebury and spent the bulk of my formative childhood years there. So I have lots of really positive associations with the area, and yeah, just excited to be part of this conversation, and what an important conversation long predating the pandemic. So curious to see where it goes, and really thankful to all of you for being here. So usually at this point, what I would do is go around and introduce the visiting team. Since we are kind of a smaller group tonight, I might leave that more open and just let people, maybe we'll do a round of introductions where everybody can introduce themselves. But I think before we get to that, we're lucky to have with us, I'll just name them quickly, Jeremy Hansen from CV Fiber. He's going to kick us off in a second with some of what they've been working on recently to kind of frame up the conversation. Thanks also to Rob Fish from the Department of Public Service for being here. Looking forward, Rob, to your reflections and hearing some of what's available kind of at the state level and some of the state thinking on this issue. Erica Campbell from Senator Sanders' office, thank you for being here. Adam from the Addison County Regional Planning Commission. Definitely got some deep expertise on the phone. And I imagine pretty much everybody here is here because they really care about this issue and probably have some things to say. Lastly, I want to acknowledge Eric Recchia from the USDA Rural Development. He's our fastidious note taker tonight. So Eric's going to be instrumental in helping us all. Yeah, exactly. Old school. But so thanks, Eric, for being here. So before I just rattle on and on, I think let's turn it over to Jeremy. And Jeremy, thanks for helping us kick off the conversation and share some of what's going on in Central Vermont.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Nick. I've kind of given this presentation so many times, so I apologize if I just kind of ramble through things too quickly. If there's any sort of details or anything that would be helpful for me to explain, please let me know. I'm the chair of CV Fiber, which is a communications union district. It's a sort of like a super municipality, like a school district or a water district. And we make up right now 20 towns in Washington, Orange, and Lamoille counties. We started with about a dozen towns in 2018, town meeting day. And we are on the cusp of building some fiber to the premises infrastructure here in Central Vermont. We've gotten a really great amount of feedback and love from our communities. Lots of people really supporting what we're trying to do as a nonprofit municipal entity. And and this was actually before we had the pandemic. It was really a teacher that was the person who motivated me as a Berlin Select Board member to actually pursue this. And looking to our neighbors to the south, a district called EC Fiber, I started talking to some other select board members and people around the area, and then it just started snowballing. A lot of people getting involved, and I can certainly not take credit for most of the good stuff that's come out of CV Fiber in the last couple of years. We have a big board. It's much bigger than the 5-person select board I was on previously, so it's a bit like herding cats. But on the other hand, we have a lot of different interests and a lot of different skills on the board, so that's been great. to give you a sense of how we got to where we are, we spent quite a bit of time doing brainstorming and working out our mission and our vision statement, which, just to boil it down, ended up being, we want to serve 100%. We want to serve every person, business, and civic institution in our member towns with fiber. So future-proof, high-speed internet access, and nobody left behind. Even though it might be more expensive, even though it might take more time, that's our ultimate goal. So using a combination of USDA rural development, thanks Eric and company, money, CARES Act funds from the state, thanks Rob. We have completed a feasibility study, we've completed a business plan, and we are at the starting gate. We're ready to go, pending some additional funds to go after some money that we're going to use for capital expenses to actually build the fiber and do the actual construction. Let's see. Gonna kind of skip over that. We've recently hired a project manager, someone who can do the work, the day-to-day work that was previously done by me and a bunch of other volunteers. So I have a day job, I have kids at home, and trying to put in 20 hours a week when you have to do that as well to get an internet service provider off the ground is not something that I recommend. So it's something that I'm passionate about and I love, but volunteers get you to a certain point. But after that, you really need someone who's going to own it as a 40+ hour a week job. So we're lucky to have our project manager to help us out as of a couple of weeks ago. We're partnering pretty actively with Washington Electric Co-op because they own a bunch of poles and they are also a nonprofit and they have some similar goals for their members as we have with all of our district residents. We've also recently formed with the other communications union districts an entity called VCUDA, VCUDA, that's the Vermont Communications Union District Association. And so I recognize Adam as one of the representatives from the Addison CUD that was recently formed. So we use that to compare notes and kind of make sure everybody's on the same page and share resources as we can. So I think that's kind of the basic idea. I'm happy to step back. Great.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. I think that's helpful and definitely a good sort of overview of. And I'm going to invite you throughout the conversation just to chime in when anything touches on your experience, because I think you guys are probably somewhere in the middle of the pack, right, in terms of CUD formation, in terms of timeline, and so that just might be a really valuable perspective to have. So thanks, thanks for kicking us off here. So I think I'm going to call a little bit of an audible. Like I said, this is a fairly small group compared to some of the ones we have. So I think what might be helpful just to get a sense of who's on the call and what our like collective background and expertise and perspective is just to do a quick round robin. Anybody can feel free to pass if you're not into sharing, but I'm just going to go around as people appear on my screen, including visiting team members. And maybe we could all just say a quick under 60 seconds since we have the time. I think we still have 85 minutes, just so we have a sense of who's here tonight and kind of maybe your name, where you live, if that feels relevant, and what brought you to this forum, sort of what's the interest in telecommunications. So probably a low-hanging fruit for you, Rob, but you're first on my list, so maybe you could start us off.
Thanks, Nick. Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. These sessions have been great. This is the second one I'm doing so far. I work with the Public Service Department. I'm the Rural Broadband Technical Assistance Specialist. It's a mouthful of a title, but what it really means is I'm providing technical assistance to groups around the state that are starting communications union districts, getting them up and running, and hopefully providing service to their community. When I came on the end of last year. At that point, there was 2 communication union districts. We're now up to 9 that represent, if you include study areas, about 70% of the towns in the state. I've been working closely with Adam and Jeremy, and I'm excited for what's happening in Addison County. Since July is when I think you first launched this effort. There are now 12 towns a part of it, and I'm excited for the growth and to keep helping you find resources and move the process along.
Thanks, Rob. Erica, can I turn to you next?
Sorry, couldn't unmute. Sure can. Erica Campbell with Office of Senator Sanders. I am actually pretty new to telecommunications. My background is in community and economic development. I have done a lot of work in agriculture. So this is largely kind of here tonight because I've been in this like year-long learning curve, and of all the learning curves I've had, I think telecom is probably one of the hardest. But Senator Sanders is hugely supportive of broadband, and we want to work it into everything we possibly can, including a Green New Deal. So, everything from the nitty gritty to little opportunities through infrastructure bills or different things like that, USDA rural development money, et cetera, to, other potential legislation. And also just really looking forward to the conversation tonight.
Thanks, Erica. Jenny, can I go to you next?
Hi, I'm Jenny Izo. I'm a regional director for Addison County. Well, actually for Community College of Vermont. Addison County is one of several counties that I oversee. And I'm here tonight with very little knowledge about telecommunication, but a great understanding of how important it is to our Vermont students to be able to access online learning. So in terms of my work, I'm very invested and have seen students really be struggling in Vermont to be able to access what they need. And then on a personal level, I live in Ripton, Vermont, which is a little mountain town, and our internet is horrific. And I have actually a fiber optic cable across from my house, which I desperately want to tap into. But anyhow, so I'd like to fix it for my town as well. I'm also part of the Addison County recovery team. So I work with Adam as well.
Great, thanks, Jenny. Maybe I'll go to Adam next.
Hi, Nick. This is Adam Luigi. I'm from the Addison County Regional Planning Commission. We have been just forming a Addison County Communications Union District. We started in July. Thus far, we have recruited 12 members in Addison County to be part of our organizational team. And last night, the town of Cornwall voted that they would like to, or passed a resolution to join. So I've got to bring that now before the organization, but I'm sure they will let Cornwall in. So that'll get us up to 13. And actually, the town of Goshen joined the Otter Valley CUD. Probably because I thought fiber would come from Brandon easier than it would come from other parts of Addison County. So there are 14 of the 21 towns in the Addison region that are a part of our nascent CUD. We've been working with Rob and Vakuda, and they've both been super helpful helping us get our learning curve together. We've gotten a big broadband innovation grant from the Department of Public Service for $60,000 to do a feasibility study and create a business plan for the CUD. We've been recruiting members. We've had our organizational meeting. We're doing things like getting EINs and DUNS numbers and establishing bank accounts. We have also, when we get ourselves organized, we'll have access to another $100,000, maybe plus, Rob, from the Department of Public Service, basically to help us with our planning studies. That's of CARES money. So we've got some good resources to get out of the gate quick, and we are looking to use those to add all of the towns in the region. I know I've talked with Spence about getting Weybridge on, and I think I'll stop there.
And that's
actually,
great.
Can I also mention we also got $10,000 from the Vermont Community Foundation, because they're right here in Middlebury too. So I need to acknowledge them for their help to the CUD.
For sure. Yeah, no, thanks, Adam. And yes, I mean, I think we're going to come back to everything, right? So at this point, I'm just looking for sort of quick introductions from folks. Really appreciate though hearing about some of those things, and I think great to tee up sort of later conversation. So next in my line is Spencer Putnam.
Well, my wife Fran is with me, and I'll let her introduce herself. I've already spoken a little bit. I've been a longtime community activist in the county and also in Weybridge particularly, and we have an unresponsive select board. I think they meet once a month, and Adam, I probably should talk to you before I approach them, but I'll get on the agenda for October. And so I need to come away from this being well prepared to take on my select board.
And I'm Fran Putnam. I'm a longtime community activist also, and for a long time I was the chair of the Weybridge Energy Committee, and I see a climate connection here. When people can work from home, they're not going to be on the road, so that's part of my interest in this topic.
Great, thank you guys. Thanks, Spencer, Fran. Eric, you're next in line. You want to say just a couple words about where you're coming from?
Hi, yeah, I am a Pathways intern with USDA Rural Development, and I started there just a couple months ago. I started there just, sorry, we just happened to be talking with someone else. I just started working there a couple months ago, and I am helping with the community facilities programs and the business programs. I live in Jericho, so I'm a Chittenden County member myself. But we don't do too much of the broadband work directly through our office. Most of the broadband programs like Reconnect are run through the national office for USDA Rural Development. So we're supportive, and we're quite happy to sort of help folks access any sort of funding opportunities they're interested in, and obviously answer any questions and sort of serve as an intermediary. But our office isn't necessarily servicing that I'm aware of. Most of the broadband grants, those are mostly just being run from the national office right now. So, but yes, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out, and we're happy to help. And I'm excited to have so many people with obviously so much hard work they're doing on this call.
That's great. Thanks, Eric. And so I see, I think 3 more. We've got John Kiernan.
Good evening. My name is John Kiernan. I work for Otter Creek Engineering. I do mostly water and wastewater projects, and have a good interest in expanding that type of utility to these small communities, and was just interested in how you guys are expanding fiber throughout the state. And I'm on the Economic Development Corporation board in Addison County as well.
Thanks, John. Karen?
I sort of am here. I'm Karen Howry, director at Addison Community Action. And with everything going on in the world, I'm seeing a lack of broadband for many, many of the clients we serve. And it's really causing them problems getting forms to the state, getting help, with schoolwork, as someone else had mentioned. I got a call from an elderly couple in Orwell who said they need to get on and they don't know what to do. So really, I see so much of a need in Addison County to connect just those little towns, like we were saying. And here I live in New Haven, and I have one end of the road I live on has it, the other end does, but the 1 or 2 houses where I am have nothing. So we're in one of those. So on a personal level, I'm in one of those no service places. So I'm on a personal level interested, but definitely people in Addison County are suffering, and with, we call them up to help them get services as much as they can. But then I'm saying, well, if you scan that to me, or if you take a photo with your camera, and it's just a hard thing for a lot of people because they just don't have service that they need. So I'm afraid I'm not going to help you a lot, but I'm here to learn so that I can help them.
No, that's great, Karen. And in a second here, I'm going to get into kind of the narrative arc, hopefully, of our conversation tonight. And a big part of it is just identifying challenges, right? And what the current circumstances are on the ground. So I think
Great.
definitely be valuable there. Lastly,
Thank
but
you.
not leastly, I want to acknowledge there's probably a human being behind MCTV Vermont. If you would like to chime in and just say where you're coming from and any thoughts on the topic, and then we'll get into the meat and potatoes. Or maybe there's not a human being behind MCT Vermont. Okay, well, if at any point you want to chime in, feel free. So, all right, guys, like I said, yeah, we have kind of a loose script that we've been following in all of the counties, all of the breakouts to try to guide the conversation, make sure that we don't get bogged down into just talking about challenges or a particular stripe of solution. But also the choice of questions, I think, is really intentional. As is mentioned, we're trying to leverage the grit and ingenuity of Vermonters, right? And I think it's really helpful to have some sort of framework for comparing best practices. And this is not the only telecommunications conversation, obviously, going on across the state. So I'm going to do my best to be kind of a low profile, gentle shepherd through the next 60 minutes or so. But I'm going to try to kind of box us in and go through these questions. So if I'm cutting anybody off or steering the conversation, please don't take it personally. And there's a little bit of intentionality behind that. So that being said, I just to overview, we'll start by thinking about kind of what are the challenges. Like I said, what are the on the ground conditions right now in Addison County and elsewhere, but what are the major hurdles that we're facing with regards to telecommunications and broadband? And I think some folks have touched a little bit on that already, but we'll get into that more. Then we're going to shift to thinking about, well, what does the dream look like? I mean, I think sometimes there's this tendency to say, oh, well, everybody has ubiquitous access to affordable high-speed broadband, and then we could move on. But fleshing that out, I mean, what does that look like in terms of infrastructure? What does that look like in terms of governance and operation? So kind of dreaming big. And then the last two questions are kind of parallel, but just about strategies to get there. What are the current strategies that are happening on the ground? And kind of CUDs will likely come up with sort of what's being implemented. And then the last question is just any future ideas or things that we could be doing that we aren't currently doing at either the local, the regional, or even the state level. These forums being, as we've said, one channel of information up or sideways, however you look at it, to the governor's action team. So really looking to gather creative ideas. So I lay out that framework, like I said, just so that if you're thinking of a great strategy, just know that we're getting there, right? So with that, let's get into it. Let's start with challenges. What's the lay of the land in Addison County with regards to broadband?
Well, I know that we in our part of Weybridge are part of the legacy New England telephone system, which means that we're relegated to DSL. A quarter of a mile from me, there's Waitsfield and Champlain Valley Telecom, which much of which has fiber optics. So we, like Karen, we have some stark contrast in a very short area. But generally, I'm sure this is true of everybody on this call, we're, except in what passes for urban centers in Vermont, we're very thinly settled. So, you know, it's sometimes as much as a half mile or a mile from house to house. And I know that's one of the challenges. So one of my questions is, I think we're all in GMP territory, but we are in different telephone companies. And I don't know how much difference that makes.
I can answer that a bit. I mean, honestly, it doesn't matter so much who owns the poles. They're obliged to provide space on the poles if somebody were to install fiber there anyways. Some organizations are faster than others, but one of the reasons that we're looking to work with Washington Electric Co-op is that they might build some of the fiber for their own use, and we might lease some of their capacity. That's one of the things that we're considering, because they can get capital. The loans that they get are much cheaper or much more favorable interest rates than we could ever hope for, even though that we eventually as a municipality can get municipal bonds.
Thanks for that, Jeremy. Yeah, other conditions, other current challenges. I mean, what I'm hearing in that is the ongoing challenge of serving really thin, sparse development outside of village centers. I think that's something everywhere. The vast constellation of different operators, right? That's interesting to hear, Jeremy, that there's sort of an obligation regardless of pole ownership, something I actually didn't know. What else? What else is sort of an impediment to where we'd like to get to? Or even coverage areas? Are all areas up to 25.3 at this point in Addison County? Yeah, go ahead, Spencer.
We're up to, if we're lucky.
Sorry, I didn't hear what the number was.
Well, actually, the ideal for consolidated in this area is 7.
Okay. Yeah, sounds a lot like Corinth.
And that's what it is like for me here too. And I wanted to mention something else, because I think Jenny, it was you that says that you said that there's fiber right across the street, and I think it's worthwhile to talk about the different kinds of fiber. Why it's not actually possible to pull a strand of that and pull it to your house. So think about fiber like roads, and the fiber that's going past your house is what we call middle mile fiber. And I want you to think about that like I-89 or I-91. And nobody would build a driveway on I-89. And so that middle mile fiber is going from big networking equipment to big networking equipment, and then goes to other smaller devices that then, if you're using cable, it goes out to essentially like a cable box and then distributes that to each individual house. And if it's a DSL or a phone connection, then that goes out to different different devices to go to your house. What we're talking about is building not middle mile fiber, but fiber to the premises, where it would be architected such that we could, and it would be budgeted and built in such a way that we could pull an individual dedicated strand of fiber to your house and give you up to gigabit speeds if that's what you chose. So even though there is fiber there, it's sort of an apples and pineapples comparison. Sounds the same, not really the same.
It makes sense, and there was probably a financial reason to do it that way, for sure. I'm with Fran and Spencer. I've heard a rumor in Ripton that consolidated communication actually limits how many people they can serve. And a new person moved into town and requested access and was told, sorry, we've already reached our limit. And I believe it, because I can't believe the drag on the internet. You said something about 25 something, and without even knowing what that means, I know that we're not even close to reaching that.
That's a good point, Jenny. I probably should have clarified. So 25.3 is what I said, and I think that's download and upload speed in megabits per second, which Rob could tell you all about. I think the department does a lot of they have these beautiful, really artistic maps of the state showing which roads are served up to which speeds. And somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I'm definitely not an expert, but 25.3 is kind of like a middle mark, and then 100 symmetrical. So 100 upload and 100 download is where we're shooting for ideally. And that's kind of the fiber standard, right? I just saw Rob's lips moving, but no sound was coming out. And then I'll go to you, Karen.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, I was just trying to clarify that if you have access to cable TV, you have access to 25.3 connections, about at least that speed. DSL is going to most likely be under 10. Fiber is the 100 by 100, and wireless varies quite a bit right now.
Great. Thanks for that, Rob. Karen, yeah, you were about to say something.
Well, mine also involves when we're saying where the problems are. I'm noticing, again, I live in New Haven, tiny little town. The other day, our school and our library even were having problems connecting. That's why I'm sitting at home on a phone and not on the internet, because I knew better than to sit in the parking lot of the library, because I talked to her and she said, don't even bother. So it's, you know, the little towns, like we were saying, are the real problems. And whether, like you said, with Consolidated, I know we have that, and that might be the problem too. A lot of people are already on it, and there's just so much they'll give.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. I think that's an interesting. I wonder if anybody with more technical chops could speak to that idea, like that Jenny brought up, of capping a certain number of customers. I mean, are there certain technologies that have like an upper limit on service? I mean, is cable a technology versus fiber that has more of a limitation, or what could be going on there?
Well, I mean, it really depends on how they designed it in the first place and how they accounted for what capacity that they thought they needed. In the case of DSL, we're talking about individual pairs of copper wires, like your phone lines. And when you string a bundle of copper wires on the poles, there is a finite number of those pairs that you have there. And one of the ways that Consolidated offers faster speeds is they said, well, you know what? You know, it would be better if you had twice as many, copper wires going to your house. And they call that the boosted, the channel bonded connection that arguably gets you 8 megabits per second. And I'm supposed to be getting that when I actually get it, but right now I'm tethered to my phone. So I run basically everything through my phone because I wasn't sure that if this call was going to drop off. So so the reason I bring this whole dreadful piece up is that if they give me 2 of the pairs and there's somebody else that needs it somewhere else down the road and they've already allocated that pair to me, there's physically no wires to go there. And this is not the first time I've heard that scenario. I heard of somebody in Washington, and it was a tenant of one of our board members, and she said, yeah, they told her, we don't have anything for you, even though like literally the previous tenant had service, but they had allocated it elsewhere.
That seems like a kind of important distinction. And is that not the case with fiber optics?
Again, it's about design and technology. Copper will only ever get you so far. Cable is quite a lot better, and fiber is really the pinnacle here. So if you architect it to make sure that everybody could potentially have gigabit speeds, then that's exactly what's going to happen. The current networks that Comcast, Charter, Consolidated, TDS, that those entities built their networks for, simply can't handle those speeds and simply can't handle expanded capacity. So we're talking about bringing more people to Vermont, which is great, but we're talking about then like bolting on, if they're building a house, bolting on additional capacity that may or may not actually be there. So try to use your network connection right about this time of night when everybody's going on and streaming their favorite Netflix movie. And in a lot of cases, in my case, it almost definitely just won't work. If I want to watch at 2 a.m., it's usually pretty good.
Thanks, Jeremy. Yeah, Spencer.
Jeremy mentioned being tethered to his phone, and in fact, we recently discovered iPhone hotspots, and we're on such a hotspot right now, but it doesn't always work. Does that depend on your telephone, your cell phone reception to whether or not it will work? And what does it do to speed?
So wireless, and so there's 2 flavors of wireless. There's fixed wireless, and those are offered by smaller entities like around here we have Cloud Alliance. So you essentially have something like a smallish cell tower like thing on poles, and larger ones like VTEL. And then there's mobile wireless, AT&T, and now Verizon, Verizon Sprint. And it depends largely, yeah, on your cell phone signal, how good the signal is. Do you have a line of sight? What the topography is? Are there leaves on the trees right now? There's a lot of variables there. But it also, because the airwaves are a shared medium, it also depends even more so how many people are using it at any given time. So fixed wireless and mobile wireless can be good solutions. From our perspective, our position as a district has been fixed wireless and mobile wireless are stopgaps on the way to getting actual proper real infrastructure that's going to be reliable, that's not going to get throttled when you have more than a handful of people using it. And for those of you getting excited about satellite internet, from Elon Musk or whatever, I'm not going to go on my usual tirade about this, but suffice it to say is it's going to be really, really good for the first 100 people that sign up in Vermont. Add another 100.
That's probably something we'll get into maybe here in a sec when we're thinking about strategy. So yeah, I want to shift now. I think it's clear kind of where we're at. Where would we like to be? What is the dream for broadband? And again, kind of thinking beyond, it's there, it's fast, it's affordable, or maybe that's it. I'd just love to reflect back to the group. What's the dream in this arena in Addison County?
I appreciated what Jeremy said about his organization, that one part of their mission statement was nobody left behind. And that would be my dream in Addison County. We are an incredibly divided, we have an incredibly wealthy and privileged group of people. And then we have a lot of people who are living on the margins and are many times invisible. And they live in Middlebury, but they also live in those tiny mountain towns as well. So I like the nobody left behind as part of our vision.
Thanks, Jenny. Karen, I see your square lighting up. Were you about to say something?
Well, she just said exactly what I was about to say when you said affordability, because that's it. The people I serve at Community Action are just that group that need it, but just can't afford it. Or when I help them with a food shelf or some other service, they're saying, well, I can't pay for food today because my bill came in for broadband, or they're doing using satellite dishes or getting it through whatever their cable company is and stuff. So affordability is really, I see some horrendous bills. So that would be a wonderful thing, affordability.
Yeah, hearing you loud and clear on that one. Other facets to the dream, to maybe it is as simple. Yeah, Spencer.
Well, we haven't really talked much about cell phone coverage, and I don't know if you meant to include that, but there are parts of Weybridge that have no cell phone coverage. So telephone hotspot, for example, would not work for internet. And as I pointed out, our cell phone coverage here is somewhat variable and not very strong. So, unless we get fiber, which I think probably fits into the ideal scenario, we need better cell phone coverage as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. And to be fair, the title of this breakout is definitely telecommunications. So it's the whole spectrum. Yeah, Adam, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, thanks. So in the feasibility study that we are doing with, actually we hired ValleyNet and Rural Innovation Strategy. ValleyNet's the operating company of EC Fiber, which has one of the oldest and more successful CUDs in in the state. So we're hoping we're going to learn a lot from them about their rural. They have a 100 by 100 model and have fiber to the home in most places. That's certainly what we're looking at, and we'll try and see where we can get to. That's what the feasibility study's about, and the business plan as to how to do it affordably.
That's great.
Question. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm talking a lot. Can I ask, why are we doing this region by region? Why aren't we? We're such a tiny state. Why aren't we doing this as a state? I mean, I just don't understand that. Did we get tired of waiting for the state because they had too many things in their way? Okay, I don't know if anybody wants to speak to that.
I wonder if someone would be able to just give like a little bit of an overview. I don't know if you could, Rob or Jeremy, of just some of the challenges that we faced in the last like couple of decades in trying to get, especially the last like decade of things. I mean, without getting too much into detail, with challenges with, for example, just accessing federal money. We have a lot of trouble getting those programs because of a lot of things that happened over the years in the way that the federal programs are set up. So that's just one issue. I have the same exact question, Jenny. I think so many things are best at the grassroots level. But, you know, such something that is going to take like hundreds of millions of, or just so much money. I don't even know exactly how much to get where we want to get. It seems like, I mean, obviously a massive federal investment, state investment, and a coordinated effort is needed. But it just seems like, and I would love to hear from, from Jeremy and others, like the CUDs at the same time seem to be playing this like incredibly important role. So just, I think you hit on something really important that I haven't really been able to discuss yet, and I'd really be interested to hear more.
Yeah, thanks, Erica, for that. I think that's probably the perfect segue to the next category of talk here, which is just like what is happening, and maybe by extension what has been happening. So I'd turn maybe Rob first to you, if you could give from your perspective kind of where we're at and how did we get here, and then maybe Jeremy, I'll go afterwards to get the CUD perspective.
Sure, a little bit of the history is helpful here. Going way back into what the dream would be in order to build out broadband to every single household in the country, look back to rural electrification. That was the one way to get electricity to people, regardless of how far out in the boonies they are. Unfortunately, in 1996, the federal government deregulated telecommunications. They thought, you deregulate it, you'll have competition, consumers will have a lot of choice. 20 plus years later, that's not what happened. The cable companies and the large companies, the investor-owned companies that need to make a large profit, only built out to the densest areas where they could make their investors happy. This left a big gap for states to try to fill and the federal government to try to fill through various programs. Specifically, the FCC has several programs, but if you look at an FCC map of showing where coverage is, if one address in a census block has coverage, that entire census block is usually prohibited from accessing any other federal funds. We have a similar issue with USDA funding here in Vermont. There was a project approved in, I believe, 2010, correct me if I'm wrong, Jeremy, that would have provided wireless internet access, wireless broadband to the vast majority of the state. The definition of broadband at that point was it 768 kilobytes per second? There was also, let's just say not sure how to put this, but there was a lot of promises made that didn't meet the capabilities of the technology. A challenge with wireless is topography. We're a mountainous state, need to have line of sight. We are also a state that has lots of trees with leaves on them. There was lots of challenges, and that didn't fulfill the promise, but because it was a loan and grant from USDA, that company and that entire area is in what they call protected borrower status. So towns in those areas can't access what is the major program right now, the federal program to build out broadband. So that's the quick and dirty of it, and that's where these communication union districts come in. A lot of these are municipal organizations. ValleyNet that runs EC Fiber is a nonprofit. They don't have that requirement to be able to have to please investors. They instead have a commitment to serve everybody. So that's the real quick and dirty of it. In terms of the history.
Is that recorded, Nick? Is this recorded?
Yes.
I want to like keep that snapshot everywhere I go. That was good.
Right. I know I feel like it really would be great to have, I mean, I guess a pamphlet or something, but like in this digital age, like a just press play, like 1 minute from the public service department, the quick and dirty. We're into the quick and dirty when it comes
that could get me in trouble quick.
How about Jeremy? Anything you'd add to that kind of picture of where we're at now?
Sure. No, I think Rob really hit it on the head. I mean, so ultimately we have the states preempted by the federal government from regulating internet service providers. So we've got ISPs that overpromise, underdeliver, like Rob said. So I'm not a state employee, so I can say things that he can't say without, and who's going to fire me, right? But really, because they were held to such a low standard or not any standard when it came to the strings that went on federal funds, they met whatever minimum standards they could possibly squeak out of that. And it's the only reason that I personally, where I am, and a lot of folks in rural Vermont have internet service at all is because the phone company that had already built the copper infrastructure 50 years ago, because they already ran the cables, because that was part of that everybody must have phone, because this is a public good. And if that had not happened, I wouldn't have service where I am. I mean, I might have cell phone service, but because they were able to bolt on internet service onto the existing copper wires that were there, they didn't have to pay any additional money. So yeah, this is a market failure. The competitive market cannot and will not serve rural Vermont without extensive federal or state subsidies of some sort, which is frankly fairly irritating to me. I mean, we're a municipal entity, and we kind of spun this up because nobody else was going to do it. So should the state have invested, or should the federal government have invested in building this? Yes, of course. But there's been an unwillingness to actually shell out the money to do this. EC Fiber has shown that with seed money, and not funding every year all the time, with seed money, the business model works. So a couple years, once we've built a critical mass and we have a certain number of subscribers, we can keep going under our own steam, just like the rural electric providers can keep going under their own steam without excessive federal or state subsidies. And I mean, and they're required, and those entities like the phone companies are also required to meet minimum standards because they are regulated, they are managed by the states. And also, I should also mention that the broadband definition at the federal level is that 25.3, which is fine if all you're doing is watching Netflix and consuming media. But if you are running a home business, if you're doing anything that requires you to send things to the internet. So I'm a computer science professor, that's my day job, and I record videos. I mean, I'm working from home now, so I'm recording videos and I'm sending materials to my students. If you're doing anything that requires you to be a content producer, you have to have that upload speed. 25.3 just doesn't cut it. So
that's great, Jeremy. I wonder if I could ask one clarifying layman question on when you mentioned the you use the phrase critical mass. Like once you get to a critical mass of customers, the business model becomes sustainable. For let's say somebody who didn't know anything about the current landscape, is that a significant hurdle in as these CUDs are getting propped up? And I'll turn to Adam or anybody who knows more. But is it easy to get the customers? I mean, are they out there?
Yes, and I mean, and so our business model relies on us going to the least dense places first, which is exactly the opposite of what a Comcast or a larger incumbent provider will do. So our business model depends on us going there first because we expect what we call the take rate, the rate at which people will subscribe when we go buy their house, to be about 40%. We can make this work if we get 6 subscribers per mile. And we are looking at roughly a $4 million project. And we think with our business plan, $4 million over 3 years to build about 150 miles of infrastructure of fiber, that can get us to something like cash flow positive after 3 years. At that point, we can go get municipal revenue bonds, and we can pay our own way from there. So, I mean, I'm happy to go into as much of the finance as you would like me to go into, and I think Rob can talk about this too. But that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it.
That's great. Thank you. May come back to more than the nuts and bolts. So yeah.
Fran.
Fran, thank you.
A quick question. Jeremy, how much will this cost to each homeowner to hook on?
So that depends. I mean, so going back to the social justice mission there as well, that depends almost entirely on how many people sign up. Because we don't have a profit motive, I mean, the more people that take service, the cheaper it is for everybody. So it's really, that's nice. But it also depends on how much subsidies we end up with. We have sort of earmarked the lowest tier of service, which is roughly equivalent to something like a cable connection at $70 a month. The only reason that we're saying that amount is because that's what EC Fiber charges. If we are heavily subsidized otherwise, that could be diminishingly small. I mean, if it were entirely paid for, if we didn't have capital costs to cover and loans and whatnot, it could be very inexpensive. Because again, we're not paying shareholders. I mean, we're building something and offering a service.
The capital costs are the challenge. It's between $20,000 and $30,000 a mile for fiber. It adds up fast, and it takes a lot to get started in the first place.
Yeah, go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, and what ends up happening though is we will go into some places that are a bit denser, so that we can kind of average out to about 6 subscribers per mile. But as long as we average to about that, the finances end up working out. So if so what we do is we sit down with a map and we look at, where are the residences, where are the businesses, and we literally count. I mean, I don't physically count. There's a software program that will let you do this. But we look at all of the roads that currently only have DSL, and we kind of draw lines and then figure out, per mile of fiber as we are sort of designing and putting together the network, what's the cheapest way that we can sort of, paint by number and get everybody in that pilot area service. I mean, and eventually, Adam and the Addison County CUD are going to be doing that. I mean, that's going to be part of the feasibility study and the business plan that's that's in the pipeline now.
I wonder, Adam, do you want to? It seems like a logical place to talk a little bit more about where the Addison County CUD is at and kind of what's going on in that camp.
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, we do have a feasibility study going currently. It was funded by the Department of Public Service. So we are looking at basically all of Addison County, and it's going to be doing a lot of what Jeremy was just talking about. How can we make this work for a price that people can afford and actually use it? So we've really just started that. So I can't tell you a lot more about that. I mean, I guess I would have a question for Rob and or Jeremy, in that Addison County is kind of challenged in that we have the Route 7 corridor that is actually pretty well served with cable and kind of runs right down the middle of the county. So you get to either side of the county, up into the mountains or down towards the lake, and the service gets, I guess I'd say progressively worse, and it depends a little bit on the legacy carrier. Some are better than others. So my question is, it'll be interesting to see how we work to kind of get over that hump and connect the two sides of the county, or not, and how we work with the legacy carriers, when it makes sense to work with the legacy carriers that are here.
So, I mean, I'm looking at the map right now. I mean, I would look at, you know, starting in the most outlying areas. I mean, here in central Vermont, we've got Montpelier, Barrytown, Berry City that are basically 100% served by cable or fiber. You know, we've got a good portion of Moortown is served by fiber from Waitsfield, Champlain Valley. Those are not places that we're probably going to get to anytime real soon. We're looking at the farther out areas that have the most demand. So in terms of building the network, it's not really crucial that you have them all contiguous necessarily. You can always hop from one place to the other through what's called backhaul. So especially if you have something like a power substation. So Velco, for example, has a lot of fiber going to each of those substations, and they're perfectly happy to rent you space on their fibers to get to another substation on the other side of Route 7. That's not that much of a stretch. So looking at, you know, this is something that the folks from ValleyNet will be doing when they start to put together your maps. You know, where is that fiber substation? That might be a good place to sort of start to piggyback from. But yeah, looking at, you know, start in Ferrisburg and build your way down, whatever. I mean, but pick a spot, but also survey the folks in those places to find out where the most demand is, or the most need for that matter.
It may also not be one solution for the entire county. You may be able to do a public-private partnership with the local telephone company. I know you have Waitsfield and Champlain Telecom that does build out fiber that covers some of your towns. And I think you have Otelco, is it? Whatever the other one there, Shoreham Telephone, that has a little bit of fiber. I know they were just purchased by a big investment company. I don't know what that's going to mean. Not optimistic, but that is another route that it could be purely public. It could be a communication union district that's a provider, or it could be a communication union district that helps facilitate this. There's different models that you can pursue, but the end game is just getting everybody the connection that they need at an affordable price.
Have any of the other CUD done public-private partnerships with the existing providers yet? Do you know?
The various CUDs are meeting with the providers. That's one of the first recommendations I have, is talk to who's providing service in your area. But the only CUD that's right now providing a lot of service is EC Fiber. CV Fiber and NEK are getting pretty darn close, but it's still in the early stage of going through the whole feasibility business planning process.
Yeah, there was an effort over in Newbury that was not a communications union district. That was something called a READY district, and they were trying to get a public-private partnership with Consolidated off the ground. And I don't know the ins and outs of that deal, but that fell apart, and Newbury is now part of EC Fiber. So EC Fiber will eventually be building up that far.
There's a few towns, I believe, up in the islands that are working with Matrix to try to do a similar type thing. I think it's Isle of Mott and Alberg.
Yeah, I wonder if anybody can speak to that, like Newbury being eventually built out. Corinth, where I live, we just joined EC Fiber. It seems like there's kind of a pipeline, right, for the development. I mean, obviously this stuff takes a while to prop up. I mean, is there anybody who could speak more to kind of what is a realistic time frame for Ripton? And like, if, especially as we're in this pandemic, right, that's the context of this whole forum. And I'm sure Karen could speak long and eloquently to like the really pressing needs of the digital divide. I mean, are there intermediate solutions? I know that's been a hot topic among a lot of different people. I'm wondering if anybody has reflections on kind of not just what is the end dream and how are we getting there, but how are we getting there in a way that sort of triages and addresses telemedicine, school, virtual schools and virtual education, et cetera.
Yeah, I think that's like one of the biggest challenges right now. You don't want to hurt your long-term business case to get people the level of service they want, but there's immediate needs right now during the pandemic. And that is something that we battle every day, going back and forth on that, of not wanting to deny anybody connection. Like there's a program right now that allows consumers, if they have cable access with, say like someone down the road has cable, but you don't at your house, that would help fund that extension. But once that extension is funded, you're going to be stuck with cable as opposed to fiber for a long time. The same thing could be said for wireless. So I think what CV Fiber is looking at with having wireless as an interim solution, or as the last mile for the person who has a driveway that's 2 miles long, I think that approach is a wise one at this point. And I'm sure Jeremy can speak more to that.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I mean, what we're looking to do as a stopgap, and because there's CARES funding that we could use by the end of the year, the idea is that we would put up some of these short-range fixed wireless transmitters that people could essentially have an antenna in their house, and it would be something like a your phone hotspot, and that's not terribly expensive to do, frankly. And then once we eventually get to those areas and build it with fiber, we would look to just simply transfer them over to the faster connection, and they would hopefully just not notice it. Just their speed would go up.
But those are line of sight, aren't they, Jeremy?
It depends on the technology. You can go through a fair number of trees, but yeah, for the most part, these are fairly short range, until you get some of the higher end dedicated spectrum that groups like VTEL or AT&T and the other big providers have access to, that do a better job of cutting through stuff and bouncing around a little bit more.
There is a company called RTO that is using aerostats, blimps. So think about how tall a cell phone tower is, and added to where you're not even going to be able to from the ground see the blimp, to provide coverage over a wider area. But it hasn't been done in Vermont before. There's a lot of not in my backyard, I don't want a blimp flying over my town issues as well. But potentially maybe that could even be explored as an interim public-private partnership, but it's the same issue of what you get now is going to impact what you get later potentially.
This makes me think about a question. This connects with a question I have. First of all, CCV is using the CARES Act to supply students with money for a laptop or for internet access. So we're funneling the money directly to students to try to help with technology, but it's we can give them all the money we need, but if there's no good internet there, it doesn't matter. My question is around, and maybe this is for Jeremy and Rob, how important is education and communication to the public around this? Like, I could see Adam and his group, the CUDA group, going forward with this and making, Adam's really good at making connections with various people who can get things done. But how important is it to pull in the entire community and to educate the community about choices and the vision?
Digital literacy is going to be key to this, as well as recognizing who your old and new allies are going to be. Like, I encourage every CUD to reach out and connect to your libraries. Libraries are becoming a center for digital literacy, and they all have hotspots as well, and they're used to doing this type of training. You also have the schools. You have healthcare professionals and the hospitals. Like, it's becoming obvious that getting all hands on deck is what's going to be necessary to solve this problem. But to your point, digital literacy, learning how to use the technology, how to leverage the technology for economic development and telehealth, and that training is key to the other side of the equation of building the demand for the service.
So Jenny, if you have, I'd be
Yeah, go
happy
ahead.
to hear them.
I think Adam just signed me up for something.
Yeah.
That's what you get when you have a good idea.
Sounds like a committee.
Yeah, right. And yeah, thanks, Jenny. You totally stole what was going to be my next brilliant question here. but thinking about what does the public interface look like? Acknowledging we've got some long-time community organizers on the call. Jeremy, I think I cut you off though. You were about to say something.
No, I was just going to make a suggestion for CCV. I already pitched this to Norwich and it kind of didn't go anywhere. Because there is going to be a lot of construction of fiber in Vermont over the next several years, and the capacity for the existing organizations that do that, and also the folks that manage these networks. So, I mean, my graduates will be able to manage the networks, but they don't know about stringing fiber and the actual physical stuff. If CCV could put together a training certificate or something like that that would help folks learn how to install and repair fiber stuff, there's going to be a imminent demand for those sorts of people in the next 6 months, a year, 18 months. So.
And Department of Labor is interested in that type of workforce development, whether it's with CCV or Vermont Tech. We also have an outstanding letter of interest to Northern Borders for a workforce development program that I would be excited to talk to you more about if we get invited for a proposal.
That's interesting angle to think about it. And I mean, I can't help but think that there's the Middlebury College too, right? I mean, I think what an educational resource to draw on. I'm wondering though on this topic. I mean, have we exhausted if a municipality joins a communications union district? Is that it? I mean, do then you assign your delegates and wash your hands and roll up your sleeves and just wait for them to get to work, Jeremy? Or are there ongoing things community members or those who are involved in the community can do to help propel this effort forward? That seems like an important thing to think about.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to take some time before you have a paid staffer to do this. So if any volunteers from anywhere, and I would say even in those places, so even if, so you said Weybridge is not part of the CUD, I would say work with the CUD even before they formally add it. So the way the statute is written actually allows CUDs to build infrastructure in neighboring towns to existing towns. So even if the select board can't get off their butts and actually join the district, you could still organize and do work there. You can also join by petition. I mean, it's gonna be faster for the select board to do that, but you can join by petition as well to put it on a ballot for town meeting, for a special meeting or something like that. But also folks in the community raising funds. So we're getting a lot of money thrown at us right now, but still the money that's required to actually go out and go to VITA or go to a bank and raise these funds requires a match. And if folks want to invest, and in this case, this would be the sort of thing that, you know, the CUDs would offer pretty favorable interest rates to do. It'd be essentially unsecured promissory notes. But yeah, of volunteers, donations, loans. The donations are tax deductible because we're a municipality using it for public purposes. Any sort of skills. You know, we have CV Fiber has the benefit of having the GIS guy, like the Vermont GIS guy that does mapping and data, and has been the expert in Vermont for the entire state for quite some time. And he's on my board, and I am eternally grateful for David Healy, because I can say, hey, can you answer this question for me about, you know, how many residences are on this road? And he's like, sure, there it is, plucks it out of the air, and it's done. So any sort of skill that people can bring in to the CUD is going to be used and is going to be valuable.
Thank you, Jerry. One thing I want to touch on, you touched on the CARES Act funding, and this is what a big limitation is right now, is that funding has to be used by the end of the year. So we're having a lot of funding thrown at us, which is great, but not necessarily able to use it for the most effective and impactful projects. So that is a challenge. The other thing that communities may be able to do is one thing that we're starting to investigate, an idea that came out of Middlebury, is community development block grants. It's another funding source that hasn't been really looked at for broadband infrastructure in the state. Right now, individual towns, well, communication union districts are prohibited from using tax-derived revenue. So a town can't pass a general obligation bond and give it to a CUD. They can't use it to fund broadband. But this might be a way that it can be tied back to economic development and existing funds that towns have. And someone could probably speak a lot better to that than I can.
Spencer, maybe your hand was up a second ago.
My hand was up. Does each town have to have its own board, Jeremy, or is your board for all the different towns that have joined together? So in other words, Adam, I know you're working on this and different towns are joining. Are the towns all together making one CUD? And so somebody from Weybridge could be part of that, but wouldn't have to do fundraising for Weybridge and then fundraising for Ripton and so on. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. And so we, so like a rural or like a regional planning commission, you have delegates from each of the various towns. And so to answer Erica's question, could it be housed in a rural or a regional planning commission? Not really. I mean, a CUD is its own thing. And we certainly partner. I mean, we partner with Central Vermont Regional Planning, definitely. And they've been helpful in a number of different ways. But yeah, Weybridge would send a delegate and an alternate, and you'd be a full voting member on the board, and it's run just like a select board. So all of the same requirements as a public entity. So open meetings, public records, meetings like this, we have our public access station, coming to all our meetings, and we find all of them. So it's run with Robert's rules, just like most other municipal entities. So when Weybridge joins, I'm sure you'll get there. When Weybridge joins, I would strongly encourage you, to be the delegate or the alternate. And even if you're not, there's always also going to be committees and other work that needs to be done, in terms of community outreach or managing the consultants that you're working with, or writing copy for press releases and these sorts of things.
Yeah, you don't have to be a telecom expert in order to participate in a CUD. All different skills are needed. We're also looking to create a CUD incubator of sort, or accelerator for new board members of communication union districts, to get you up to speed and knowing more jargon than you'll know what to do with.
So that's actually our next meeting will be our CUD 101. So we had our organizational meeting. Next meeting will be educational. And I will say we've gotten some pretty talented people step forward as representatives from different towns that have different knowledges in finance or in CUDs. So I'm hopeful we'll have a really good board.
Well, Adam, if you're admitting hangers-on that aren't yet members, you should send us an invitation.
Okay, I can send you the agendas, sure. And you're welcome to join. It's a public meeting.
So just looking at the clock, this is usually the time we would transition, and I'd have to sometimes forcibly tell people, bring the conversation to a close and turn it over to our visiting team to share their reflections. I think the nature of this conversation being fairly technical, we've been hearing a lot throughout from the visiting team. So I guess I would just open it up, acknowledging in about 10 minutes, we're due to come back to the closing session. Anybody who's been quieter, I don't know, John, if you're still with us. Karen, we haven't heard from you for a while. folks in Weybridge? I mean, how is this all sitting? Does this resonate? Does this feel like there's a plan of action on the ground to address some of the challenges we opened with? Are there points of potential synergy? Adam, other perspectives from the RPC level? Erica, I'll just open it up at this point to anybody who has kind of closing thoughts.
Well, I was quiet. I was listening to everything. It did get a lot of technical knowledge, but I'm learning. But how do we find out? Like, we know Weybridge isn't in. How do we find out if our town is in? Go just call a town clerk, or?
You can certainly
So I
call your
can tell you,
town clerk, but if you go to the Department of Public Service website, there's a map that I'm doing my best to keep up to date. Addison keeps pushing more towns that shows all the towns that are involved in a communication union district and what district they're involved in and the contact info for each.
Okay, because I'm on that site anyway, because that's where the electric arrearage is. So I will, when I'm on that tomorrow, take a look. Thank you.
so I can tell you New Haven is in, and Jim Walsh is your representative.
Oh, okay. He was our fire warden. Okay. Thank you.
RPC is the maybe most under-acknowledged source of local information, right? Yeah, I would definitely imagine Adam and company would be a good resource for that. So what else, folks? John, I've noticed you're unmuted. Is that in preparation to speak?
Well, yeah, I was going to just say, I mean, on a totally personal level, I live less than 1 mile away from the Shoreham Village, which has very high speed internet. And I live on a road that's fairly populated. I mean, probably in excess of 20 houses per mile. And there's no expectation that I will have anything anytime soon. And I wanted to check to see, is there, when this actually gets implemented, are there phases where it's going to be the service is going to be brought out like spokes on a wheel, or is it, Jeremy, I was interested to hear what you were saying is, the intent is just, start serving the farthest one away, and how much of an initial investment is needed to get started. I don't, but if I had $20,000 in my back pocket, if I went over to Telco and said, hey, give me internet, would it be possible? Or is there it's not just string and wire on a pole, there's a lot more to it. And that's just the question is how much initial investment is needed to really get the ball rolling.
So I guess I can, I'll tackle that. I mean, it really depends on, so in terms of Addison County, it's going to depend on what their feasibility study and the business plan says. So for us, our pilot project for the first 3 years envisions 150 miles of fiber for a total project cost of about $4.5 million. And the match funding that we're hoping to eventually chase down, and that we may have just gotten from the legislature, should that all go through, we're looking for about $400,000 or $500,000 in matching funds and about $4 million in loans from VITA to get us over that that first hump. And like I said before, once we start building, once any of the CUDs start building, if they have subscribers and if they have revenues from those subscribers, then you can plow that right back into building more and building more and building more. So I think we've been at this in Central Vermont for several years now, and I would not want to tell anybody in any of my towns, yeah, you're next. So I think you would definitely want to stay in touch with Adam and get a sense of what the feasibility study and the business plan looks like before I think they could answer that. Unless the CUD there makes a a decision that, you know what, yeah, it has to be Shoreham first. It just has to be for some reason. And if that's the case, then yeah, maybe you're a year or two out.
So one other thing to add is this could shift dramatically depending on what the federal government does. If the federal government wakes up and realizes that broadband's an essential service and provides block grants to the towns as opposed to existing programs that don't have the data to deploy effectively or favor the incumbent providers, that would make a world of difference. You might be talking about a much quicker time frame for being able to build out your entire district. So that's my pitch. Changing the expiration date, changing the date CARES Act money needs to be used at, even if nothing else is accomplished, would also provide a lot more flexibility and allow a lot more people to be accomplished, a lot more people to be connected.
We're really keeping with the theme of you guys reading my mind and stealing my questions. That was going to be my last pivot. Eric, I wonder, so far, largely federal money has been kind of absent from the conversation. Any updates you could give us from what the deliberations are looking like down south these days? And is that something that could be a significant factor in this whole conversation?
Well, I feel like I'm a broken record every day, but I don't have a whole lot of good news to share there. There is not a lot of movement right now on a relief bill. There's not a lot of, the negotiations aren't going well. There certainly wasn't any money for broadband in the skinny bill, and but there was, I think there was money for broadband in the HEROES Act. So, you know, we'll see what happens. You know, I think we also have to pass a budget, so that this continuing resolution CR has to get passed so we can keep the government open, and that's a really big priority right now too. So, and then there's an election, so it's you know, I don't know what's going to happen with the relief bill, and I don't think many people do. It's pretty it's up in the air. I did want to just add that there is a infrastructure, our highway bill is up at the end of the year, and there has been, you know, a lot of talk in the last couple of years, like, let's do a massive infrastructure bill that includes broadband. So I guess there's a possibility there, but again, just given the political climate, you know, I think in the House infrastructure bill, for example, I think it was a little under 100 billion. It was like 83 billion for broadband in that bill. So that would be good. Again, it's not just about putting the money out there, it's making sure it's the right fit. So that is something that, you know, I think the whole entire Vermont delegation offices are trying to make sure that, you know, for example, we'd love to include CUDs, or at least not preclude them from getting any of this money. Love to see block grants to the state. I haven't really thought about to municipalities, so that's really a great conversation there. So yeah, I think that's my federal update. And you know, I think it's just really important that we keep working at Vermont, getting that synergy to track the money, and also just look at I feel like there's a lot of amazing innovation models happening and a lot of synergy. So that's really great. And I'm excited that you guys in Addison County are doing this.
Likewise, yeah, I guess if I can humbly share one observation, this being the 11th of 14 counties we've had these conversations in. I mean, it's been really interesting to see just the level of, I mean, in all different topics, these being a COVID discussion, but it really feels like there's a convergence of a sense of urgency and people really stepping up to the plate to address some of these things. And I mean, I think that's emblematic of this conversation here and the movement within Addison County. So maybe that's my lame attempt at some closing remarks that now that we're 2 minutes out, but just really great to see what's happening across the state and specifically here in Addison County. Really want to thank all of you guys for being part of this conversation. I know it's maybe definitely a thorough broadband 101, and maybe you got a little bit more than you bit off or we're shooting to in terms of all the ins and outs, but I mean, I know I just learned a lot, and really appreciate the visiting team taking the time to be here, everybody taking the time to be here on a now dark, but before that fairly beautiful Thursday evening. So with that, if there's no pressing closing comments from anyone, I'm going to walk us through the process of getting back to the main room, which hopefully should be fairly painless. It's the exact same as it was to get over here. I'm going to post in the chat. So I've just posted the link. If you copy that link and then order of operations, copy the link, close out of this meeting, repaste the link into your browser, it should take you right back over to the main session. So give that a shot, and thank you guys so much for being here. It's really been a pleasure, and I'll see you in the next virtual space in a moment here.